Look at those swirls. Oh man. My gosh, look at that. That's just gorgeous. There's some great swirls right in there, and those swirls up in there. Let me zoom in so you can see some of that. That's just fantastic. Look at that. And there you can really see the textures. Wow. Look at that layering. All those different colors I put on before coming underneath. Welcome back to another episode of The Wet Pastelist. I'm Pastelist Avon Waters, and today we are working on the third picture design that will give you multiple composition that you can use in your paintings. This is part 3 of a 3-part series, so if you haven't seen those, try to take a look at those. This one builds upon what we talked about in part 1. I'm going to start today with a picture using the radiating lines. Radiating lines is a very common, often misunderstood picture design. It has multiple compositional options, and we'll discuss those. I will demonstrate how to take a painting from the wash stage that I started using that design. I'll show you in black and white what that design does and discuss the ways that it can create multiple compositional options when you're designing your pictures. This week I'm starting with radiating lines, and I'm starting with something different rather than start from scratch. Basically what I did was I've already washed this in. I wanted a texture to work on. This is a 20 by 20 drawing paper that has had, first I started with a charcoal. I just made radiating lines come into a point. Now you'll notice this is 1/3, 2/3. So we go back to our basic principles that were in part 1 of video 1. So when you're working with the radiating lines, you can put the axis somewhere near that 1/3. You can put another axis near another 1/3. This comes in, this comes in, this comes in, this faint line here comes in, and this comes in. So radiating lines is a principle that can be used along with that 1/3 principle we studied in week 1. Now the neat thing about radiating lines, just like all of our other picture designs, we get multiple composition options out of it. This one can be this way. The radiating lines can be at the top, coming down. Think of those sunsets where behind the cloud, instead of this dark area, you got a bright mass with those beams of light coming down. That is a natural radiating line composition from nature. The radiating lines can come in from the side, a high horizon, reflections in the water with some waves or some darker water coming in to maybe a center of interest here. We can do it there, and we're back to this. So there's at least 4 possible composition picture designs out of this. This one picture design with radiating lines can be used in various ways. Now it doesn't have to fall in these 1/3. It can fall in different areas. You could have this radiating lines be an attempt to break the so-called rules, which there are none, but if you wanted to try to place a subject in the center and have it in the center axis, maybe you're off the center a little bit where there's a building lit up or the sunset, but these radiating lines would come down to it with a natural horizon somewhere near the center. It's a way, in a still life, you could have your center of interest in the center and have folds of a fabric come in here. So there's all sorts of options with this radiating lines, not just the 4 that follow in the 1/3. It's just easiest for beginners to use that 1/3 principle that was in video 1 to think of radiating lines as a K, letter K. You've got your letter K coming in here and a leg out with some other lines that come into it. So a good starting point, you don't need a lot of lines, but anything more than this shape here, other lines, makes it a radiating line composition. So let's get started. I'll take this a little further, probably not to finish, and you can see how I can adjust colors and I can emphasize some of these areas to create this composition picture design using this composition, using this picture design with the radiating lines. If, because I've blocked this in already, that isn't clear enough, let's do a black and white example. You can see that we have the kind of initial K shape, and out from that are radiating lines. As I said, this could be a sunset, horizon with lights going up into the clouds or coming down from clouds. It could be this way, it could be this way. So there's a lot of flexibility with this. It would be real easy to put something up in here, but unless that something was pointing lines down towards this, because of the radiating line design, has to not have 2 points of interest. So what I'm going to do, because the points are coming to this area here, is I'm going to probably have some sort of point of interest, some light coming through from behind this tree. And what that looks like at the end, I don't know yet. So again, as you've seen in my other videos, I put a place setter in. It's just so that I don't lose focus. Get rid of that thing. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but I'll go over that with the darks here in a minute. And enough of that should show through that we don't lose focus on what we're looking at. Besides this video, you see I'm using a lot of yellows. I'm actually working on a series where yellow is the predominant color. Not something that this composition video is about, but just so you see why I have that focus in here. Get some yellow oranges up in there. Remember how I said in some of my color theory videos, as the sky comes up over us, this is a two-dimensional plane. This is off in the distance. There's a lot of atmospheric haze off in the distance. As the sky comes up over us, this is overhead, or close to overhead. When you look straight up, there's less atmosphere and there's less particles of dust. Therefore, the sky is bluer, so to speak, if we were using blues, than it would be. It'd be violets and blue-violets off in the haze because there's so much atmosphere from where we stand and look to the horizon as opposed to when we look straight up. So our colors are much more intense, and I'm putting this yellow-orange overhead so that this will have a tendency to come up this way rather than just straight up. So far my values, other than the underpainting, the values I put on top were 7, 8, 9, and 10. These darker areas here I'm pulling out of the 4 and 5 box. And the opposite of yellow, since this is going to be predominantly yellow, is violet. So I'm going to put some of that underneath here over this red so that when we mix it we'll get a red-violet. which will create a great contrast in hues, even though I'm going to be staying pretty close to the color wheel on some of these things along those the lighter end of the color wheel scale turn to gray. And I'm always conscious of trying to point towards that area. I could put that in here and create, because I want to get rid of that light area, but just see the purple dust on my fingers, see how it's graying that down. So I'll use a slightly different value, because if I put that in there it'll be too dark. This is more for this, this 4 and 5 value is more to underlay some of the colors that will go on top of this. I'll get my red on top there so we get a red violet. Might get a little orange violet in there. Still working with big shapes, but I'm always conscious of that radiating lines. There's something happening in there. Remember, we want that light to show through under the tree. So I'm just putting a few little heavy marks so that it reminds me that we've got one or more trees that will end up in that area. If you are not far enough along in your art career to work in large shapes, drawing this out and making radiating lines with pencil in a notepad is a great way to start to figure out from your source, your photo source, or drawings that you do, or miniature paintings that you do. This is a great way to do it and get used to using those sources as you draw in miniature, just using pencil before you go to adding paint and color. But you see, we still have some of that. I'm not pressing very hard. I'm just going to use a little bit of that, and we'll get our violet back in there. The last thing I want to do, right now it's really looking like I'm pointing everything there, and you can overdo it with radiating lines and get too many little lines going into there. That's an assessment you make near the middle of the process, of the painting process, or near the end. You'll make some assessments, like you may need to cover some up. But in the beginning, when we are going from our underpainting, after we've laid in some of these lines, we go from our underpainting to try to include some of those lines and very conscious of making sure we get them in there. We can always soften them up. It becomes, just like everything, it becomes a little harder the further along you get into the process to add things once the picture has developed to a certain point. So this will get us in there. It's easy to blend those together and soften them if we get too many. A minute ago I told you of the violet that I had there. Violet and yellow are complements, therefore they should create kind of a gray when we blend them together. And with the brighter colors around it, that's too much of a point in, but you could easily see how, if you had clouds on a sunset, how that would work. I put a little more gray up in that top to tone down some of that saturation in those yellow oranges that are up in there. And maybe we've got some things at the horizon coming in, we'll see. But you can start to see just from this little bit here, like had a sunset with radiating lines through the clouds, it would be real easy to use this technique to do that. Tone those down. That violet will tone some of that down. Probably wasn't the right violet for there, but again, we're still in the early stages. We're just trying to work in big shapes. And I love that destruction process where we just start to build something and destroy it. This may be destroying something after you've created it, just may be out of your comfort zone. That's fine, you don't have to do this step, but you can see maybe from as I build this, you'll see how this destruction process works for me. It's not for everybody. But you can see now we've gotten some harmonious colors. We've gotten our yellows as predominant. We don't have enough yellow-orange in these things yet. I don't know how far I'll take that to yellow-oranges, maybe just the edges because I need darker values down in here to point across and down. So we'll see how this develops so you can see the radiating line development of this picture design. We're getting close to the middle stage of the development of this picture, and I have texture on here with that clear gesso, and I'm going to go over, when I go over, this is the same color that's in my highlight, but I'm going to go over lightly over those grays where I stuck the violet in there, and that will tone that down a little bit, and when we do some blending, you can see we'll get back to that yellow theme that I'm looking for in this picture. Same here, I had that violet up in here. I'm not going to go up there because I want something a little more yellow-orange that's more intense saturation up in there since it's overhead. I'm not putting it in yet, but this color, this color, this color, this color, or value of yellow are all pretty much the same. But when we get near the end of this, we can create a much more intense color underneath this so that all this pointing will mean something when we get near the end of the picture. I won't be going all the way to the end with this, but far enough along that you could see the possibilities of what this does for us. This is almost a fluorescent. The fluorescence, Diana Townsend fluorescents, you can't see very well on videos, but boy, they really stand out when you've got other colors coming through underneath. But since the light's coming up in here, I want some of that intense yellow-orange up in here, but because the tree is going to have a red-orange, with that light being yellow, I'm going to bring my yellow-oranges across the top, where the atmosphere is thinner. But around this tree, we will have areas of light that are different than other parts of that sky. And I may use that in some highlights if I can get some darkened lights in there. But right now we're just playing, we're just having some fun, seeing where it goes. I love to play. I love to have fun. This I have to be toned down. It shouldn't be the same colors that I have up there, but I need to at least get this color in here, and then I can gray it down as I proceed. Have to darken that back up again. violet back down in here and put that red over red orange. I'm trying to get a little bit more red orange, a dirtier red orange. Let's see if we can see if that will work. Let's tone that down a little bit. Let's see where we are here. This is almost an ochre. It's got a lot of yellow in it. These edges of where trees meet the sky. I do a lot of painting of the air around things as opposed to the object itself. So this is kind of natural for me, but if you're into local color, which would be greens, or if this was a fall scene, you might have some reds and oranges, but there's also some underlying greens with blue skies and the fall colors if you went that direction. If you went blue water, blue skies, it's all on the color wheel, and you could make those decisions. But since I'm picking colors that are not, I like to paint unrealistic colors, controlling the values of those colors to make it work. And I don't like this. This tree suddenly has blended, turned into some sort of weird tree going off that way. So we'll have to fix that. We'll keep those reds in there. Probably orange them up a little bit. Another destruction, but little by little, the layers that are getting on here, not pressing as hard when I do this destruction, because I'm starting to get the layers the way I want them. I'm starting to get this tree to blend off into the distance. This is becoming very interesting to me. Oh my gosh. I'm going to zoom in so you can see this, but the layering with that color, there's some great swirls where when I added the gesso, oh my gosh, look at that. That's just gorgeous. Right in there, and those swirls up in there. Let me zoom in so you can see some of that. That's just fantastic. Look at those swirls. Oh man. Look at the texture. When you add texture with pastel, you get some wonderful, wonderful layering effects. So you oil artists, if you paint over your oil paintings and do layers and let them dry, or acrylic artist, you can get the same sort of thing. Look at that, and there you can really see the textures. Wow. Look at that layering, all those different colors I put on before coming underneath and coming out. That is super. I'm loving this. Yeah, all those textures. I'm just absolutely loving that. You can't get that layering effect in pastel. You can get layers with using marks, but when you use the broadside and you paint, you cover up some of those layers. So for our pastel artists out there, texture really, really helps you build up layers of color underneath and let them show through. You oil painters, like I said, you oil painters are able to, with your brush strokes, let those oils dry or acrylics dry, and you can get that same effect. But having been an oil and acrylic painter, I think this is why I love this texture, because I'm able to get both the immediacy of pastel with some of that layering effect that I got when I used to paint with oils and a few times with acrylics. So really, really fun stuff. I got to fix that now. Now I got those violets and those red oranges in there. Look what happens when I put this more intense yellow around it. That gives you a taste for what we can do, and I'm just lightly scumbling over that so you get that radiant line coming through there. Come down this way, we'll come through there. Look what I can do here, man. This is almost the 1/3 mark. This is the 1/3 mark somewhere up in here. You don't have to be exact, You just don't want to be in the center accidentally. That's why sometimes we put an X there to keep you out of the center, unless you're intentionally trying to work on a composition where you are intentionally trying to center something. And those, folks, those centered compositions are a difficult thing to pull off. First of all, you'll have all your artist friends be looking at your composition, will say, you stuck that in the center. That's what I love. They've got to think about it. Did he mean to do that? Did she mean to do that? And when you get them thinking, then they start, your artist friends will be like, hey, I think this works. Or, you tried it, but yeah, you can pull it off. So your artist friends could help you out if you try to put a subject in the center and try to do that tough composition. All right. I gotta stand back and look at that horizon line. When I do this on the easel, many times it will go off at an angle, and this one sure did. So let's get it back in there in the right place, high on the right hand side. Get some red violet in there. I don't want the highlights here. This is another line. Even though it's parallel with the horizon, this line is part of that radiating line composition. It's actually the basis of the start of that composition. You've got a strong vertical, a strong horizontal. Now you need these other radiating lines to assist. Try to get some gray violets back in there. Not be too light. I think that one's too light. Maybe easier to go dark and then lighten it up with some of the colors that are going to go over that. That mutes down that red orange that's in there. Keeps it from competing with the red orange that's up here. And again, the whole time I'm working, I'm looking and I'm starting to evaluate now more the intensity of those lines pointing, making judgments of what's too many lines, what lines are too bright, what lines need toned down. These are all things that start to enter the middle to late middle stages of the image itself. We started out big, we got ourselves some nice large shapes and some nice large wedges pointing different towards the center of interest. We tone things down. Now you'll notice I'm working in smaller bits because now I'm starting to try to make these forms resemble, although I like abstract, to be on the verge of abstraction, I still, because this is an obvious landscape for this demonstration, I'm still wanting it to at least read as a group of trees or a tree that is on the edge of a body of water. So I'm conscious of trying to now begin to get some of these smaller shapes that might become shadow areas where layers of limbs are layered on top of one another. Here in the Midwest, we don't have a lot of evergreens, so these trees with leaves are mostly maples and oaks and elms, and depending on the way the branches connect and the way that they bunch up, you are able to create the illusion of whether this is, in this particular case, it's more vertical, the branches are going out. This could be a number of our trees. Some oaks near the bottom, the branches go down. This is very similar to a sugar maple. Just keep working until you can reach the end of the middle stage and start working on finish. Alright, I think you can still see a little bit of those pointing, radiating lines. This one needs a little work. It's a little confusing here. I don't know whether I've got a dark radiating line coming in or whether I've got a light one that's just not developed yet. So I have to work on this area, and the same here, and the same here. I've got some more details and tree trunks to put in, but I think we're far enough along that you can see how you can develop from large shapes to small shapes, always conscious of that design element that you selected. You have to intentionally select the design you want your painting to be. You can't just let it happen. And I'm going to illustrate how, because everything's pointing in here, I started this video showing you how I could put a sun here behind some hazy clouds, high humidity day, but then I have a center of interest here, but all of our lines are pointing here. Near the end of this, what I will do, I'm not ready to do it yet, but just because I'm not going to take this to a finish, I want you to see how I've grabbed a yellow that is part of the, it's about if you turn this to gray, it'd be about a 9 on a scale of 10, grayscale. But you can see how if I put in a tree trunk coming up here and some of those areas of light coming down, tree holes, what we call sky holes, if I were to put some of those things in here, these, like I said, it's not ready yet, but you can tell the intensity of this. Some of those areas that the water splashes up on the shore, just a couple little lines, and we're going to get something down in here maybe. As I said, this is not to the point where I normally put this in, but I want you to see the contrast of these color hues. How near the end of this, and the final stage, is just punching up those highlights where you want that center of interest to be. Here is a much more saturated color that came out of the 6 and 7 hue box, of my box of hues, 6 and 7. This brighter, more bright, although it's not highly saturated because it's such a bright spot. This is more saturated, and this is even more saturated in our family, yellow hue family. So I've still got lots of work here. There's some evening up. This one's confused. Is it the dark that's radiating in? Is it both of them? But this coming across breaks up these radiating lines. So maybe what I need to do is I need to bring in, since this is water, bring in near my finish, bring in some of those lines as ripples on the water and reinforce some of that. Same here maybe. Maybe this is what this is calling for. And if I do it there, this still right here is a problem. If I do it here, bring in some of that, widen it out. I don't know yet. Maybe this is too much. I'll stand back, take a look at it, make assessments, and I'll head towards the finish of this. If that gives you a good idea, we'll stop there, and hopefully you are able to apply the radiating line design with the different compositions that it brings with it, and all those compositions we talked about in video 1 and video 2. We used video 1, the thirds here, and you can easily see how you can incorporate and have hundreds of different picture designs just by using a combination of the 3 picture designs I talked about in video 1, 2, and 3. Where I previously ended this, I took a look at it. I had some issues, remember, down in here, and I took a look at it and I decided, well, we're not going to go with a body of water. Let's do a field. And with the light coming from behind the trees, kind of at this angle, we can create some of these elongated shadows. Move this tree off of the tree line, move it out into here, so the shadow makes sense as light comes across that tree, creating a shadow there. So we get this pointing, we get the highlights behind it and the horizon trees pointing. We get the light between this shadow coming in. We can create a little bit of a shadow right in here. From this tree we'll bring this down. So we have this tree that will be coming up out of the brush underneath it here. That's a little dark. We'll get some of that moved in. That's more of a place setter. We'll make a little wider. It's a bigger tree off in the distance. We'll get some of those shapes in there, just so we know where we're headed with that. And looky there, even that branch, if I create that branch coming out in here, it's also doing a point. So as you firm up some of the details on things, you can begin to use and make some decisions on a smaller scale. So this is back in closer to our center of interest. You'll see I changed the color of this a little bit to bring it forward. Eventually I'll have this coming out near where the fence line of this field is. We'll create a base for that tree in a minute. And then this tree I brought forward with more intense reds, and we will get it with some shape and work on bringing it forward more. So now we have the base of the trees also pointing towards the center of interest, changing it from reflections in water to a field. We are able to move this in, and I pushed the trees back in the distance using a little bit more violets and grays, mixing with that yellow. We still keep it on the in the yellow scale, which is what I want. I might need to put some more yellow in some of those areas as I blend. But you can see now we're starting to get movement of space and movement of light and movement of shapes. So I took that a little bit further. I want to turn the camera back on and let you see some of the progress on that. But you can see that things can, when you do memory drawings like this, you're able to do lots of things. You're not nailed down to, oh, it's got to be a body of water with reflections in it, oh, it's got to be this or that. So when you reach that point of your career, you can do what I just did here, but also remember that even if you're working from a source, even if that radiating line isn't there, you can create some of these things by looking at your photo source and following the cloud shapes and just reshaping the clouds or reshaping the foreground or reshaping the shadows to create that radiating line as an option for something that you stopped, took a photograph of, or stopped and did a drawing of, and now you want to paint. So I'll continue working on this. and it will probably, I'm kind of liking this, so it may end up on my website eventually too. But definitely the yellow, using the yellows and some of the analogous colors, the selection I made here is really working with this radiating line design. I'll probably blend some of these things in and use a brayer, and I've got some work up in here to do because that's just not quite right yet. But there you go. If you're liking the content in these videos, please hit the like button or subscribe. Hitting the like button goes a long way to letting others find this when they're searching for composition. So until next time, everybody, happy painting, and we'll have a new topic for you next week. Bye-bye.